What's up, everybody, and welcome to the new year, and what better way to roll into the 2020s than with the Fat Boys? And today I want to talk about sort of lesser-known, more obscure Fat Boys' slight dips into cop-killing hardcore gangster rap, because yeah, that happened. Now, the Fat Boys have always been, at least sometimes, which sounds like a contradiction, but it's not, I'll explain that, hardcore. You know, like, all the way back to songs like Hardcore Reggae on their second album. You know, one of their albums was Come Back Hard Again. They had singles like Rock Rulin', you know, where they're going, you know, like they had Hell Yeah, you know, where they had maybe kind of grungy guitars and doing that sort of Run DMC King of Rock thing. Or, you know, like Prince Marky D had a really vicious flow. Cool Rock has a really kind of deep hardcore voice. You know, like they could go hardcore. But that would be like, stylistically, the same way that Run DMC were really hardcore. But you wouldn't say Run DMC were gangster rappers. You know, like Snoop Doggy Dogg is one of the quintessential gangster rappers, but vocally, he's not hardcore. So there's a distinction there. And so I want to talk about specifically the Fat Boys going into, like, gangster rap. And it happened first, surprisingly early, on a very little-known turn. You certainly know their song Jailhouse Rap, if you know the Fat Boys at all. The single came out in 1984. It's one of their earliest singles, but not their earliest. First it was Reality, when they were known as the Disco 3. Then their second song was called The Fat Boys, when they were still called the Disco 3. And then they rolled that song title over into their group name. They became known as the Fat Boys. That's when they came out with their first album. The single Fat Boys is certainly on it. In fact, the only song that's not on it of their early recordings is Reality. That's, I guess, a little bit too far pre-Fat Boys. Fat Boys' debut album and most of their early classic singles, not most of them, but many of their classic early singles, including Jailhouse Rap, came out in 1984. Reality came out in 1983. So here we go, right here. This is the 12-inch single, Jailhouse Rap by the Fat Boys. It's a long song. It's like 8 minutes long. This is back in the days, of course, when that was not uncommon. You know, rappers delay, you know, Adventures of Super Rhymes, etc., etc. So we're talking about versions of Jailhouse Rap. Now, the 12-inch single is almost 8 minutes long. It's got the instrumental on the B-side. There's naturally a shorter version, of course. Here is the 7-inch. I've got it in the Columbia sleeve because I bought it used and it came in Columbia sleeve, but that's not where it should come in. It's on Sutra Records, just like all their early stuff. The Fat Boys were on Sutra Records back when they were the Disco 3 and stayed that way all the way until like 1987 when they got signed to Columbia and did even more major label stuff. But so this is all Sutra we're talking about now. So anyway, there's a short 7-inch version, which is only like 3.5 minutes long. And the B-side, by the way, is Stick 'Em, another classic Fat Boys rap. This is their self-titled album now. As you can see from the picture cover, though, they're clearly playing up Jailhouse Rap. They're there in their costumes that they wore in their music video, because there was a music video for this. They actually had a lot of music videos, which makes sense because A, the Fat Boys were a little bit more kid-friendly, a little bit more pop, especially for hip-hop in 1984. You know, this is really before hip-hop crossed over at all. These were, in some ways, the first ones to really kind of begin that, even before Run DMC. So anyway, they had a bunch of videos. Here you go. Burr, Watch 'Em is a collection of many, but not all their music videos. Again, from the Sutra age only. But it's right on there. Jailhouse Rap. The music video is a little bit shorter than the 12-inch single and stuff, or a couple minutes shorter. But this album version actually is slightly longer, but it's just a little bit extra instrumentation. Basically, it's like the 12-inch version of the full-length song. And then their Greatest Hits album, which wrapped up their Sutra period. So again, there's no Columbia stuff on here. Definitely has Jailhouse Rap, but it's a shorter edit again. It's longer than the 7-inch, but far shorter than the others. Is like 4.5 minutes. So anyway, besides just sort of letting the beat ride or maybe a little extra piano, the difference in these versions really is that some of them cut off the last verse. So let's get into what Jailhouse Rap is, because that's important for what we're going to talk about. And Jailhouse Rap is a funny song, absolutely playing up the novelty that they are the Fat Boys, they are overweight, haha. You know, the Fat Boys really caused that whole boom of like Heavy D, Chunky A, Notorious Big, like everybody, Chub Rock, the Skinny Boys as an inversion, but everybody who is sort of overweight using their weight as part of their hip-hop persona, Fat Joe, Big Pun, etc., is a huge thing. Started 100% by the Fat Boys. One of their big things, of course, was sort of bringing self-esteem to overweight kids and stuff like that, but in a very kind of playful way. Again, they could be very hardcore, but they're always at least somewhat family-friendly. They never really had sex raps or anything like that, or, you know, if they did, it was very kind of tame and innuendo-ish kind of stuff. They did have a little bit of sex rap. I'm thinking now, like, they had that song from the She-Devil soundtrack and stuff, but they were definitely pretty tame and pretty family-friendly. Although, as we'll see, they got into cop-killing gangster rap. But yeah, so focusing in, Jailhouse Rap was about 2 verses to start off with, one by Marky D, one by Cool Rock Ski. Each one tells a story of how they wound up in jail, and again, totally humorous, silly stories as they would get into jail purely the way only the Fat Boys could. Prince Marky D, the pizzeria is closed, but he needs a pizza so bad that he breaks in and he's just eating all the pizza and he falls asleep and he wakes up as the police arrive and arrest him in the morning. And Cool Rock Ski, he's at a Burger King and he's ordering tons and tons and tons of food. And then it's time to pay the bill. He goes, I'm going to pay for nothing. I'm the king of the slop. And gets arrested and hauled off to jail. Then there's a little mini verse just about Buff Love and his beatboxing skills, sort of kind of a typical filler verse, which isn't on the theme of Jailhouse Rock at all. And on some versions, that's it. But on the full-length versions, on the album and on the 12-inch, there's a final verse by Prince Marky D, which is actually even better than all the rest of the material. It's definitely more serious. Brings it well into the vein of sort of like The Message by, Melly Mel and Duke Booty and Grandmaster Flash. Very kind of serious stuff about, life in prison and, now you remember you're your mama's son and all. It's no longer jokey. It's no longer about being overweight or anything like that. And it's actually pretty smart and well written and holds up even to this day. So that's the song Jailhouse Rap. But there's one more interesting thing to note on the 12-inch single specifically. If you read the label real close, and I'll read it to you since, boom, 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 it says, from the soundtrack to the film, Cries of the City. Now you might be saying, what is that? I've never heard of a movie called Cries of the City. There is no movie called Cries of the City, and that's true even to this day. There's no movie called Cries of the City. It doesn't exist. But another movie exists, which this is referring to. Again, Jailhouse Rap, 1984. Their first album, 1984. Their first film appearance was Crush Groove in 1985 when they did All You Can Eat. And they kind of blew up largely a lot from that. But this would have been their first appearance because in 1986, a movie came out called Knights of the City. Knights of the City is what Cries of the City was originally titled, and it sat on a shelf for a number of years, so it didn't come out till 1986, but it's supposed to come out way back in 1984. That's why Jailhouse Rap from the 12-inch single is from the soundtrack to Cries of the City. And we're coming to the gangsta stuff. I promise you we're getting there. So Knights of the City is, like a lot of sort of early hip-hop movies, about breakdance / music group. This time I think they're in Florida, but they're sort of inner city tough guys. Not only are they a breakdance group who also performs songs and plays guitars and kind of sings like Michael Jackson, but they're also literally a street gang, and they have a rival street gang who they fight with. They go to jail. When in jail, who do they wind up next to? In the same cell as the Fat Boys, and the Fat Boys perform the Jailhouse Rap. This one is different, though. It doesn't have any of the instrumental. They do play it just on Buff Love's beatbox, which is great, and more kind of a cappella, more hardcore, kind of reminiscent of something like Stick'em, and of course fits with the theme of them being in jail and not having instrumentation. But the lyrics are totally different. This is an abridged version, as you can imagine, because it's squeezed into a song, into a film. It's not a musical film necessarily. And so they do the Jailhouse Rap with the same hook, in jail because we failed. But Prince Marky D and Kowalski both have totally different verses. And this is where they go straight up hardcore. No longer, this is nothing about being fat. This is nothing about, Burger King and pizza. This is about living the street life and winding up in prison.
We're in jail. We're in jail because we failed. But there was just one day that I will always remember. In 81, the 3rd day of September, with my brand new Thule. Gonna rob this store, gonna get a quick yacht or even more. Push out the trade, 2 set of read for heaven, but the owner responded with a 357. Tossed a few rounds, one of us got hit, then it fell to the floor and my blood went drip.
Cool Rock Ski actually says, shooting cops in the back because I got it like that. Like it is straight up hardcore. They are flowing more hardcore, but lyrically it absolutely is like street gangster rap. And this again, the movie came out in 1986, but it was made in 1984 and made for 1984, which is pretty early in the days of anything that could be considered gangster rap. This is before like Schoolie D. This is like when Ice-T was still doing electro. This is, really in the early days.
Put me in the slab, but I don't give a damn. Started by still quite some crazy man. Such a bag, so I'm a head beating on my old man. Shooting cops in the back, cause I had a like.
But I would say, yes, it's definitely meant to have sort of a message in the same way again that The Message does, as in, Grandmaster Flash Melly Mel. But they're not really, like, except for saying we're in jail because we failed, it's really just pure, bravado stories of being street, living on the street life. Then there's actually more to it. Also, we find out in the cell with them is Curtis Blow, and he does a rap, and he's dressed up like Curtis Blow. Like, the Fat Boys are at least, dressed like you could believe you'd find them in prison. A little bit like the Fat Boys. Like, Marky D has a shirt kind of rolled up, exposing his belly and all. So they do look a little bit like the Fat Boys, but Curtis Blow really looks like, hey, I'm a pop musician who's just sort of been beamed into the cell to perform. So he does a little rap. Two of the guys from the breakdance group in the movie, like the main guys, they do a very short mini rap. You can tell they can't rap, so they have 2 bars just kind of thrown there in the middle. If you look at the closing credits, though, the Jailhouse Rap by the Fat Boys, Curtis Blow rap, and the 2 guys raps, which is their character names, which I don't remember, but are all listed as 3 separate songs, but it's all merged into one moment. It's one scene, and it all flows together, and it still has Buff Love beatboxing behind all of it. So it's sort of like one giant mega mix song, but it's actually kind of technically broken up at the, according to the closing credits, it only has 3 separate songs. One last important note is that actually, if you continue watching the scene, see what happens then in the movie. So they're all rapping and dancing, and also in the jail with them is a record producer who owns Twilight Records, and he hears these guys rapping, and he says, "Oh, you guys are great. Once you get out of jail, come see me, and I'll get you a record deal." And then that's the plot of the movie. So if you watch the scene now, where you get to the part where the record producer is handing out his business card to the breakdancers, / rock band / blah blah blah, you can hear the Fat Boys are still rapping in the background. And you really can't make out you can only make out words here and there, because every time a character speaks, it totally washes out what they're saying. So you're only getting little tiny glimpses, when there's a pause in their dialogue. You can go, oh, there's something. But what you can tell from that, I've listened to it pretty closely a number of times, is that it's definitely more new verses. It's the Fat Boys rapping, and it's not the other verses from Jailhouse Rap that we know. So, in theory, I guess that song is actually much longer that they wrote and produced, but we just barely get to hear any of it. And really, the whole thing desperately makes me wish that version had also been pressed on wax or released in any capacity. Like, it had been the B-side to the 12-inch, if it had been a separate 12-inch, if it was a bonus track on a Japanese CD, I don't care. I just wish they had released it in some way, shape, or form, because that would be fantastic. It's a total alternate version of Jailhouse Rap, without the kind of light music, without the kind of fun stuff. I love Jailhouse Rap, and I love the silly stuff. The whole thing about breaking the pizzeria is a lot of fun, but I would love also to hear this alternate version with just Buff Love beatbox and all that. It would be fantastic. So that's their early dip into gangsta hip-hop phase, but it comes back again towards the end of their career. Like I said, now they've always been hardcore delivery-wise and stuff like that throughout, but it wasn't until Prince Marky D left the group and the Fat Boys put out their last album without him, so it was just Kurowski and Buff Love, called Mack Daddy, where they get into it. In fact, that song, Mack Daddy, is one of 2 or 3. There's a song on there called The Source, and that's hardcore in the more traditional, Run DMC way. He's rapping hardcore, but he's just sort of rapping about rapping. It's over kind of Run DMC style beats, not like the King of Rock style beats, but Peter Piper style beats. And it's just kind of him flexing his skills and being hardcore, which is fun. As much as you say anything about the Fat Boys, they were always pretty talented. At this point, Buff Love is doing most or all of the production, although there are a couple guys co-credited as co-producers. But Buff Love was definitely writing and producing a lot at this point, and is definitely largely behind this album, I would say. But there are a few moments where they sort of dip into it. And by they, I mean Cool Rock, because he's really the only guy rapping on here. Buff Love does a tiny little bit. But basically, he's just kicking in background lyrics. He has one short verse on one of the love songs, I think. Or actually, I think he has a solo love song on there. But basically, otherwise, it's Buff Love is doing the music. He's not really beatboxing much by this point, but he's doing the music, co-writing, and Kurowski is doing all the rapping. And so there's Mack Daddy is really the one, I would say, where he actually has a verse where it seems like he's talking about shooting cops pretty directly.
I flow with the quick shit, quick lip, without afraid of a cop with a nice stick. So here's the result. He gets beat to a punk, he's out worse than the hoe.
So that was 1991. That's the last Fat Boys album officially together. Prince Marky D continued to do solo stuff on Motown, and very briefly on Mariah Carey's label. He absolutely was not gangsta, though. He's the other way. He's going pure into like R&B with Mark Morales, and was, writing, producing. Of course, he did stuff like Real Love with Mary J. Blige and all that kind of stuff. Lots of Father MC music. His music was just like that. In fact, even sometimes more R&B. He had some songs which were straight R&B, which meant he wasn't vocally performing on them at all. Because those albums were credited to Prince Marky D and the Soul Convention, so the Soul Convention was handling all those vocals. He rapped certainly on that album, though, on both albums. But at some points, he definitely handed off vocal duties completely to singers. So not at all gangster rap. Sometimes, again, he's still kind of come out hardcore. Like, he did a song with FS Effect called Mentally Stable, and he's definitely rapping pretty hard on there, but not street at all. And for most people, I think, as far as they know, that's really the end of the Fat Boys. There's just one more record, which surprisingly almost nobody seems to know about. I never see it mentioned online or anything, even within, like, Fat Boys discussions and stuff. So here we go, 1994, which puts it well after Mack Daddy, and after even a lot of the Prince Marky D stuff, Rockman. And I guess part of the reason why people don't know about it is because it's just credited to Rockman, and people know who the heck that is. But Rockman is Kool Rock Ski. If you listen to Mack Daddy, he calls himself Rockman all the time, even in the video for Whip It On Me, like he has Rockman on his jacket, so that was already kind of his identity. But still, that was credited to the Fat Boys. This is the first record credited to just Rockman. So if you didn't know, if you just saw this in the store, you could be forgiven. This is an indie label called Conquest Records, but it was enough of a push behind him to kind of like, I have the 12-inch, but there was like a CD and like a single and all that kind of stuff, so it's not like some ultra obscure pretty thing. It's just more obscure in the sense that it never got anybody's radar. It's 2-song 12-inch, and is produced by Buff Love Productions. So really, it's like a continuation of Mack Daddy. It's Buff Love producing Kool Rock Ski. And he even shouts out Prince Marky D on here, so you know it's not like all bad blood. In fact, Buff Love worked on some of the Prince Marky D albums a little bit, co-writing and doing a little stuff on there. So they were always, even though the group broke up, they stayed somewhat close, which was nice to know. But again, really, this is just like Mack Daddy. This is Kool Rock Ski rapping, Buff Love producing and co-writing. And it's the most gangster rap of all. This is definitely Kool Rock Ski wanting to kind of shed the Fat Boys persona. He's definitely doing kind of gangster rap stuff. The songs are called Rollin' With My Homies, which has a sort of a Dr. Dre G-Funk influence to it. And then the other song is Get Ready for the Jack. Yes, as in, jacking. Rollin' With My Homies features a guy called MT, which is interesting. That stands for Mike Terror. He had an album out a couple years later. And even that album was co-produced and co-written by Buff Love. He was sort of one of the groups that the Fat Boys were managing as the Fat Boys were breaking up. MT is very kind of hardcore, got a grimy voice. He's one of those guys who's sort of horrorcore, sort of not. Like, he just kind of dips into it. He kind of puts some horror theme imagery into his lyrics. But you could say he's just sort of a tough, like sort of like that line between like Gangsta Nip and Ghetto Boys when they're doing Mind of a Lunatic or something, where you sort of say, are they hardcore? Sort of at their most extreme times, yes, but lots of times, no. That's MT. His album's pretty good. But anyway, his debut a few years earlier is right here in 1994, Rollin' With the Homies. And then Kool Rock Ski gets on here, or Rockman, pardon. But it's really Get Ready for the Jack, where he goes more straight up gangsta. And yes, there's definitely a clip where he's talking about, like, pass me the gun, I'm going to shoot these cops. That's right in there. I'll play the clip.
Slinging them jumbos, running like a punk cat, with the cat when you keep 5-0. But I don't sling with the whack gang. I'd rather make money for self. You know what I'm saying? Back to the nigga playing Glock. I got a poking hot pursuit, trying to take what Rock got. Back a little epic of the episode. The brain got to overload, so I got to let it explode.
So I don't think he's ever, on this single or on Mack Daddy or anywhere else, he's really trying to tell you that he's like a gangsta hardcore, literally like, a street tough. We don't actually believe really he's out there gangbanging with guns and shooting at cops, and I don't think he's trying to convince us of that. Obviously, we all know the Fat Boys, since they were very young, were pop stars and living that life. I think he's just trying to say, like, look, I can flow hardcore, I can keep up with the 90s style. The production on here, particularly on Get Ready for the Jack, Rollin' With My Homies, that, kind of more G-Funk influence is a little hack and a little, canned. But the other stuff, definitely, actually, if you heard, Get Ready for the Jack, you listen to that beat and you listen to him flow, and you don't necessarily know it's Kool Rock Ski or any connection to the Fat Boys, like, it sounds like a good indie 90s hip-hop record. Like, he can rap hard, he can bring that, so it sounds pretty legit. The production's pretty much there. He's got the talent. And I think that was his point. I think that's why he's doing it. But still, lyrically, at least in moments, that's in there. That content is in there, which is, I mean, I think, I'm not saying that to like shame him or anything. I think it's fun. It's just one more thing the Fat Boys did, and it's something that almost nobody knows the Fat Boys did, which is why I'm doing a video about it. So look, like Mack Daddy, this is definitely lesser tier Fat Boys. Their previous albums were better. You know, their early 80s stuff was classic. Their Columbia stuff, while sometimes a little too pop and, you know, overexposed and, you know, commercially produced, you know, doing songs with, like, the Beach Boys and stuff like that. Not necessarily what pure hardcore purists are in the mood for, but still well done. This later era stuff does sound definitely sounds lower budget. They definitely are missing Prince Marky D. Like, he brought a strong, powerful quality that is absent in these, you know, in that last album and on this 12-inch single. But if you're a hardcore Fat Boys fan, you like Mack Daddy, then you should definitely check out this 12-inch. It's not hard to find. Again, it's not like only a handful were pressed. It's not obscure in that sense. So, you know, you can get it super cheap. So it's worth tracking down and adding to your collection if you like the Fat Boys at all. I think it's a lot of fun, even though, you know, it's not necessarily meant to be fun. So yeah, that's it. Just wanted to share that with you guys. Once again, Happy New Year, and see you next time.
Yo, what up, Rock, man? You gonna kick some for the homies, man? Yo, what up? You know, you gonna represent?
Here's some rough stuff that I wrote, hope is hitting. Take a good licking and I keep phone ticking. It's about 11 in the morning. Heard the phone ringing, yo, what's up? It's my man and he's bored. Ain't nothing going on, nigga. My crew is nappy, trigger happy, and they roll like a gangster figure. I'm getting blitzed with the endo. I pickety pop, goes to gap when I'm feeling kinda nice black. I'm taking a ride down south side. I'm picking up Funny Jack, Chicky J, and my man Blaze. I got the ride sitting real low. And the girls wanna speak when they see me in the benzo. But that's a life of a Mack, jet black. Benz, get a lot of ends and friends. I'm the G that your mama said don't see. It don't change when you see me in my CE. I see many fingers pointing, damn, saying with a joint and smooth like an ointment. But some punks get jealous. But that's how it is when I'm rolling with the homies. Rolling with the homies on the east side. Yeah, just rolling with the homies. Cooling with the brothers in the low ride. Yeah, just rolling with the homies. Rolling with the homies on the east side. Rolling with the homies. Cooling with the brothers in the low ride. Check this out here. Stop for some grub to eat. Mickey D's got it going on, so don't F up my back seat.
Yeah, man in the house, yeah. And I think y'all kids don't know what time it is.